Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched Illegal, a fascinating look at the life of one immigrant escaping war in Central America and making the most of an opportunity here in the United States. Here with us is the director of Illegal, Nick Alexander, and the producer and star of the film, Laz Ayala. Hello, Nick and Laz, thank you for joining us.
Our
Th-
pleasure.
Thank you, Kurt, for having us.
So, Nick, it's my understanding this was your first feature length film that you've done, correct?
Yeah, that is correct, Kurt. This was my first feature film. I had done other film projects over the last few years. I graduated from Southern Oregon University. And ever since I graduated, I was looking for an opportunity to tell stories. And the story of Laz Ayala came really less than a year after I graduated.
And so, how did you find out about Laz's story, and how did that conversation develop into let's make a film together?
It's a really a fascinating story how Laz and I met because I was hired for it was a Rotary presentation in Medford, and I didn't know anything about Laz. A mutual friend of ours just connected us and asked that I record Laz's presentation. So I was just again fresh out of college, running my video business. Heck, why not? And so there I go, and Laz presents his story, shares his testimony, and I just, like so many people, was inspired. I was impressed with his story and moved by just the very fact that he fled his country so young and made the most of an incredible opportunity here in the US. So Laz and I, that day, I remember shaking his hand, talking with him, and I broached the question that I don't think I really believed. I really didn't believe it would come to pass. And I told Laz that his life could be a movie. Well, little did I know, it became a reality. And so ever since that time in 2017, we kept in touch. And at the time, Laz was working on a book about his life, and it was about a year later in fall 2018 when Laz was ready to collaborate with me and produce this film.
So, Laz, you had been working on a book about your story anyway. Normally, documentaries require an enormous amount of research before you ever start filming. So, this one perhaps had been a little bit different because I'm Nick probably just had to point the camera in your general direction and just let you do your thing, right? Because you no one knows your story better than you, right? So,
Right. Well, it's we were just talking about that a few minutes ago about how uh, seamless the process of producing the film went, at least the filming and capturing the story. And and the reason why I believe it was so seamless is because I have the story, I've lived the story, right? And so it was, and I had it, of course, already in my mind about what the story needed to be. I had just finished writing a book, and I had relived my story, my experience as an immigrant, as a, surviving a war, and here, and then of course the conversation and around the topic of immigration, and of course the recent dehumanization and criminalization of immigrants that we hear so much about in the media, that had really made everything, have made me have forced me to relive essentially that experience. And so once I started writing the book, there's a message that I wanted to communicate, and that is, uh, the humanity of the immigrant, the experiences that we go through, the struggles that we go through, but also put it in the context of the bigger picture, and that is, their contributions to the country, and provide basically also shed some light on the myths and facts around the topic. Uh, and so it was all in my mind. We did create a script that essentially followed the theme of the book, and that of course was very helpful. We did have that level of organization thanks to Nick. But as we were on the, out in the trenches filming, I had a very clear vision for what you know I wanted the film to capture and the message that I wanted the film to deliver. And Nick and the team did an incredible job, of course, with capturing those moments and um, also pulling sometimes emotions and out of me that made the film what it is. So
Okay.
you're right. I had already done a certain amount of research through writing the book. I had done, especially in regards to the topic, the political aspects of the topic. I had to understand that better. I had done that research, but outside of that, the story was in me, still in me, and so that certainly made it very much easier for us to do this project.
Right. You definitely touched on something that's important. You know, illegal immigration has become a very hot button political issue lately, particularly just in the last couple of years. Now, I wouldn't call your film necessarily a politically motivated documentary. You know, it's the story of your life and the struggles that you go through. But it is good that your film puts a face to something that a lot of times people don't see. They debate the issue without really hearing the personal stories or the causes behind what would motivate someone to go through what you endured. Um, in the course of filmmaking, did you feel any sort of pressure in giving that bigger picture perspective behind the causation of illegal immigration? And Nick, do you think Laz's story and success could perhaps change people's minds about the issue? Because this is something that really just people are divided and very entrenched on, and it's difficult to have a conversation about it when you're just talking about the topic. But when you put a face and a name to it, it can change people's perspective, right?
You're exactly right, Kurt. You know, for me, I've been blessed with traveling around the world, going to Latin America. I speak Spanish, and so I feel that I can connect and relate to the culture so much better than most people. But I think one of the things that I really treasured by doing this project is, like you just said, getting into the shoes of these immigrants. For us to go to El Salvador, Guatemala, to be on the US Mexico border in Tijuana, and to hear these stories and see the level of desperation of these people, you don't get that on the news. You only see the masses, you just see the wall and all of the energy and anger that is generated by the politicians. So for me, this movie was so much more than just making a call for immigration reform. You see Laz Ayala as a little boy. You see the life that he had. Most people will never have the opportunity to go to El Salvador. It's such a bummer. But movie making allows us to transport these viewers to El Salvador, go through the war, a war that most people don't even know about. The fact that most of us never even learned about the civil war that took place and the reasons and the consequences of that war. So Illegal is a powerful movie because the viewer gets to go to these places that most people never get to go to, and they walk out of that theater or they finish the movie on their device. And I think it's an educational movie. It's biographical. You get the personal story of Laz as an immigrant, as a young man, a teenager, and the whole life story of Laz. And you also see the call to action, the bigger picture, the political picture, where Laz offers a solution to the problem. So I believe there are a lot of documentaries about immigration, but generally there's not there's one or the other. It's heavily political or it's heavily biographical, but I believe that we married the two together very well in the film Illegal.
Laz, since you had been working on a book and then you got involved in the film, I'm curious on your motivations behind wanting to tell your story, because this also puts you out there and potentially in the danger zone for people who are against illegal immigration, it really kind of makes you a poster child for it with potential repercussions. So, what did you have any reservations about being involved in a project that would put your name out there so much?
Kurt, I definitely, well, yes. To answer your question about did I feel fear and did I question whether or not to get involved in this topic? I did. But first, I have to say that I, as an immigrant, living here in this country for almost 40 years now, I have never felt the level of dehumanization and criminalization of immigrants. And although I am a naturalized U.S. citizen today, I'm a business owner, I have economic stability. Uh, this does not affect me directly. When the conversation around illegal immigration raised to the level that it has uh, reached today, I felt like my own humanity, my own dignity was under attack. And I say this in the film in those same words, and I still feel that today. But I started feeling that 5, 6 years ago when the narrative reached those levels, and I waited for the media, for advocates, for people, for the community to say this is wrong, this is immoral, for people to rise up and say, we can't do this. We cannot treat people the way we are treating them, regardless of their legal status. And then, of course, that frustrated me. It angered me. And I felt like, there was no voice. There was no one telling the immigrants' side of the story. And I had this frustration that was just building up to the degree that I reached a point of depression, severe depression at that time, and not knowing what to do and frustrated. And I finally reached a point where I'm like, well, no one else seems to be caring. No one else seems to be doing anything. I'm just a local businessman here in Ashland, Oregon. Where is Hollywood in this? Where is the media? Where are the news? Where are the advocates? Where are the politicians that can speak up against this level of inhumane attack and dehumanization of people? And so I started then looking at myself and saying, well, you have a story and you have a voice and you have the means and you have a name in this community that you know you have that respects you. You have created a lot of goodwill in this community. You have contacts, people. And then I started thinking, yes, what can I do though? What how can I get involved in this conversation? And then the question was, and should I? Should I? And if I do, what are the potential repercussions? And I started thinking about what that would mean if I got involved, how that might affect me in business or with my friendships and in the community, and how the community might respond, and how certain individuals might even respond to, me, an immigrant, uh, having a very different point of view. And I had to come to terms with even risking my own safety in doing this. And because I knew that was, also a possibility, right? Or to be subject to attacks, public attacks, I become a target, like you said. So, and I debated with that question for about a year, to be honest with you, before I went public with my story and I spoke publicly about the topic. It took a year for me to decide that. But when I decided to do that, that moment, that happened at a point when I said, well, I came to the conclusion that I have two options. I can either do this and follow this calling, which was very, very strong and very compelling calling that I needed to do something. And after having wrestled with the questions of the potential repercussions or not, I don't have to do this. I can also just continue with my life and not make this my issue. But when I put it in those terms of I have two options, the second option was not an option for me because I could also see that this would carry with me until the last hour, last minute of my life, and it would haunt me. And feel I would probably die. I would have died a very miserable man and very disappointed. And perhaps I would go to the degree of saying I would have died a failed man. And that I could not live with. I could not live with that. And I felt like this is the right thing to do. And I cannot let fear of any kind keep me from doing what I believe is right, is the right thing, regardless of what happens and what the repercussions might be. And so when I came to terms with that question, and I said, okay, and I did, I said, okay, God, I'm here. Use me in any capacity that you want. I don't know where you're taking me with this, but here I am. Here I am. And within 2 weeks, I was at a function here at SOU, a dinner function with some uh, community leaders, well, one of the individuals there was Sue Capillas, a good friend of mine, who it was at that time the president of my Rotary Club. And after going around the table and sharing a little bit about our story, she said, Laz, you have to share your story with our club. And a month and a half later, I was in front of the largest Rotary Club here in the region, one of the largest clubs in Oregon, with full of people who are leaders in our community, government officials, and the presentation was so incredibly well received by that group that inspired me to then continue presenting, writing op-eds, and then later saying, after being very vocal here in the community about my opinions on the topic, realizing that, okay, feeling empowered and feeling that, okay, I can go. I want to make I want to be, I have to continue with this and I have to do it outside of this area. And so how do I do that? And so that's where the idea of writing a book came about, using that book as a trampoline to get engaged in the conversation. And then, of course, later beating Nick and producing the film, realizing too that, realizing and understanding the power of film. And so realizing that this would be an even more powerful way for me to engage in this conversation nationally, which we are now. And now I think we're gaining a lot of momentum. There's a lot of support behind the effort, and our goal is to get to Washington with this conversation and with our message to reform this broken system of illegal employment.
One thing that I do appreciate about the film, and it touches on it some, I'm sure the book touches on it more, is amidst all the conversations about illegal immigration, we don't talk very often about the root cause. And the reality is that we can call them Reagan's secret wars of the 80s and even going back to the 70s and 60s to South America and Central America was basically blown up by the United States. And we still see the repercussions of that today. People, when we talk about illegal immigration, very rarely in the conversations that come up the fact that these countries are still trying to recover from the damage that was done by us 40 years ago in the midst of the Cold War fervor. And people like you are the direct result of uh, actions that were taken in Washington, D.C. decades ago. And that's kind of sad. Though in those conversations, it is fascinating. The subject remains in the news to this day, and it keeps changing. So I am curious, Nick, if during the editing process of this film, if some of the film's aspect had to change as new information came in about how this country is addressing illegal immigration, because it seems to touch on it a little bit at the end, but I'm sure from the point at which you filmed and then more stuff comes up, did you have to kind of shift a little bit in terms of the structure of the film as new info came out?
uh, Obviously, the movie Illegal is timely. In the last 4, 6, even 10 years, like Laz said, illegal immigration continues to be a hot button topic. I I would say that the movie, the overarching plot, really didn't change because from the very beginning, I read Laz's book before the trip, and that allowed me to essentially create 8 chapters for the movie. And you see those from the beginning, the culture, his life in El Salvador, the escape, a fish out of water in Southern California in his teenage years, up to the end where Laz presents the call to action, a solution to this ongoing problem of illegal immigration, or as Laz points out, the problem of illegal employment. So, in my opinion, regardless of what was happening in the news, of course, we used um, modern, updated content over the last year, 2, 3 years of media that you see in Tijuana and at other border crossings. So we incorporated current media, but I feel like the vision of illegal for Laz was the same from the beginning to the end. Now, me as the editor, I will mention this. I think that my vision changed as I edited the movie and I saw the bigger picture. So for me, I was really focused on the biographical Laz in El Salvador, Laz in the US, and his successes. But at a certain point, I feel that thanks to Laz and the editing suite where we spent many nights, long nights together, browsing and perusing footage and making cuts. I feel that there was that time where my vision changed, and that helped us finish the movie and complete the story.
There's a lot of really beautiful B-roll shots in this film from the trip that you took down to Central America. So, what were the various locations where you shot illegal, and what kind of challenges come from trying to film in a foreign country?
The making of Illegal is a fascinating project because December 2018, essentially 60, 70% of the movie was filmed in a mere 10 days. So Laz and I would say about a month and a half of planning. Laz and I, one thing that we have in common is that when we have a goal, we're gonna pursue it and we're gonna accelerate toward that goal as quick as we can. And so in 10 days, we went to El Salvador, of course. We spent 4 or 5 days there. And we also went to Guatemala, which is poignant because that's where Laz crossed the border uh, originally. So El Salvador, Guatemala. We went to Southern California, where Laz grew up in his teenage years, and then we went back to Tijuana, Mexico, which, if you recall, December 2018 was definitely in the news because you had the caravans coming up through Central America and arriving to Tijuana. So we were there in that moment. So as far as the B-roll of the movie, we were in multiple countries. The challenges were many. But I think our team really took them on in a great way. We all worked together. Me and my other camera operator, Tanner, we communicated. We were following Laz around day after day. Laz really, he knew what he wanted, and so we went to the market. We went down, we went and visited neighbors. We went down to the creek. We went to the lake. I mean, I feel like Laz really, he knew what he wanted. This was his home, and so there were challenges such as the heat. It's Central America, so it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Or the roads, getting from point A to point B. Maybe it takes longer, or we're riding in the back of a pickup bed. So I feel like in general, we just rolled with the punches. The team, we just adapted. It was early mornings, late nights. We're all exhausted, but in general, I feel like we met those challenges. The only other challenge that I would say that really stands out to me was Tijuana, because we wanted to connect with those caravan migrants and to talk with them. And of course, there was a lot of yellow tape. We could not just enter these facilities. But we found an alternative. We went to downtown Tijuana, and there was a place where we could interact with these people. So I feel like whenever there was a challenge, Laz and myself, we found ways to navigate, and that made illegal successful.
So, how difficult is it to get a crew together and convince them that, hey, you know what would be cool? Let's all head down to areas that have been war ravaged for decades and remain some of the most dangerous places on the planet to this day. It's not really. I mean, it looks beautiful, and I personally have never been. I've been to Tijuana, but that's about as close as I've gotten. It looks amazing, but these aren't places to go on a family picnic. To this day, they remain pretty dangerous. So, were there reservations, Laz, for you maybe returning back to this area, or the crew in figuring, are we actually going to go to these places that
Yeah.
has had kind of perpetual war for 30 on years now? That
Hmm. In my mind, it wasn't a concern because I return to El Salvador at least once or twice a year sometimes, and I have been going back ever since the war ended, since 1991. uh, I would say almost every year I've been going back, and so I know the country well. I know where not to go myself or where not to take visitors with me. Um, and I had the vision of the film of what I wanted the film to be, and I knew that we would be safe, as safe as you can be, the moment you leave your house, right? And so I had made arrangements for lodging and so on. I wasn't concerned for my safety or theirs. I wouldn't have put them in a situation where it would have, put their lives in danger. But you're right. I mean, at that time, El Salvador, I think, was ranked the number one, the most violent country in the world. Now, the media and sometimes what we get on the news, some of that I think can also be exaggerated, but it's real. There's gangs, there's violence, uh, but obviously there's violence right here in the USA, right? There's
yeah, exactly.
mass shootings there, and so do we feel unsafe walking out? No, and so in fact, I think we have today we have probably more violence, and it even before we've reached this crisis that we are living through today with the protests and Black Lives Matter movement. There was still a lot of violence in the streets of the USA, right? So I I didn't feel for a second that there was that danger for us, but also I know it's a third world country, and the moment that we leave our homes and we get in a car, we're taking a risk. Uh, now, I don't think that Nick felt any concern. There was some concern, I think, with a couple of our other team members, especially Tanner, particularly, I think, from his parents. He wasn't 18 yet at the time, was he?
No, no.
So he was underage and under the responsibility of Nick, who has a very good friendship with Tanner and also his family. But I could see the concern in Tanner's parents, and also even in Nick's parents to some degree. But they I could also see as in their eyes a sense of acceptance, knowing that they can't stop this young man. He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and God bless him, and God is gonna take care of him. And actually, I remember Fred expressing those exact words to me, and it's like he's just following his dreams, and we all we can do is support that.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. So there was a strong element of trust, but I also had to do some. I had to reassure them that of the parents, and we had our meetings. Reassure them that that they would be okay, and reassure them that I knew where I was going, where I was taking them, and And yeah, and they trusted me, and I appreciate that. And we didn't have one incident, I think, where we might have felt unsafe.
No, yeah, I think, Laz, you're exactly right. And ironically, I think, well, first of all, like I mentioned before, I traveled a lot in Latin America. My wife is actually from Nicaragua, which is a neighboring country to El Salvador. So I actually felt pretty at home, almost as if I was in Nicaragua. So I was pretty comfortable, and sometimes I would get too comfortable, and I'm going out at 5 in the morning to do drone shots, and Laz is like, "Hey, maybe you should bring, maybe I'll go with you." But I think for me, looking back, El Salvador actually wasn't so much the concern as Tijuana. Tijuana was much more volatile. In El Salvador, we were always with Laz's family. We had that security. We had their hospitality. But in Tijuana, as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think if there was any day, any moment where maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty, just because that wasn't our home in any means, it would have been Tijuana. But overall, it was a great trip, and I believe that Tanner, my wife, and myself, and everyone who went was pleasantly surprised how smooth it was.
Mhm.
It definitely helps to have a escort with you who knows the places to go and not to go. Like, this is an area that maybe the cartels wouldn't like you taking a close look at with cameras and whatnot. So maybe you should not film this corner of the area and spend more time looking over here at this nice market. Since this was your first feature film, what did you learn in the process of it?
Yeah, wow. Making my first feature film, I think, Laz and we had many conversations before we went. And I feel like even then I had received a great education. I had done many, smaller scale projects here in Southern Oregon, but not even me knew what was going to be needed, what was going to be involved in the making of this film. The film trip itself, I feel like I learned so much directing it and navigating a team of 7 or 8, where before I was in my element, I'm at home, but now I'm in a foreign country. There's so many new elements in play. We're backing up the data every day. There's always a concern for the gear and keeping that safe, making sure that we're capturing all the shots that we expected to capture. Something that I learned is flexibility and adaptation. I am a very organized person, and Laz and we had the shots we wanted. And I think that at some point, I just learned to accept that it's good to have a plan, but it's also good to just go with the flow. And when a conversation with Laz and a neighbor goes an hour long and we didn't even plan for that, it's okay. Another example is we were in Southern California. We went to the Seventh Day Adventist Church. I have to tell the story because it's so powerful. So Laz, we filmed him at this church. We had one interview planned, and then there arose an opportunity for Laz to speak with this gentleman, Robert Vaca, about his life story. And there was a church member, a good friend of Laz, that wanted Laz to be interviewed. And we were supposed to be heading to Tijuana. So this is our third last day or second last day before we go home. So me as a director, other members of the team, we're all thinking, well, what do we do? Do we stay and jeopardize a part of Tijuana? Do we go and possibly have a regret? Well, we decided to stay. And this interview in the movie, because it begins with this interview, and every chapter of the movie, it returns to that interview with Laz and Robert Vaca. So I cannot tell you how significant that interview was. It was so powerful. Robert did an incredible job asking Laz questions, and that became the foundation for the movie. So if there's anything that I learned for my first feature film, was blessed is the flexible, learn to adapt, roll with the punches, because it's going to come together exactly how it's meant to be.
So what Nick is saying is for the audience and for you to understand is that Robert Vaca, the interviewer, the gentleman interviewing me throughout the movie, that was not part of our plot.
No.
It was not. We were doing this as a favor, but we decided for my friends. But we recorded it. But I did give them specific questions that I wanted him to ask me that were actually very much in line with the film and very much in line with the book, because all of that was fresh in my mind, right? And so I just wrote down the 8 questions, the 8 big questions that are in the 8 chapters in the film and the 8 chapters in the book, and he nailed those questions just perfectly. And we produced this 30-minute interview, not thinking while we're doing this, and even for the days to come, that this would become actually the anchor of the film, that this would be the anchor of the movie. And it's I as you know, my story and the experiences that I've lived through have taught me very at a very young age to be flexible and to adapt and to be adaptable and to be fluid. And I think when we allow for fluidity and flexibility, and we are willing to adapt, I think we can survive any challenge, any situation in life, and we can overcome, and we can do amazing things if we're flexible.
We will end our time with this question to both of you. And I realize at the end of your film, it does have a call to action, and that the film ultimately, hopefully, sparks a dialogue, and maybe a different dialogue from what this country has been having to date regarding the topic of illegal immigration. But what do both of you hope that people take away from your film at the end of the day?
Well, I'll go first. What I hope that people take away from this film is, one, that we are all humans, that we're all people. And I'm hoping, one of the main messages in the movie and in the book is to humanize this conversation. Um, so that's the one. Uh, I would say the number one goal that I have, and number two is to educate, to help people understand this topic, that there is a solution, that there is actually an easy solution, and that is what we need is to pass. And well, we need to revamp our guest worker programs to allow workers to come to this country legally and humanely, workers that would meet the demand of our industries. We need to create a system that assesses the needs of our industries for foreign labor, allow for those visas to be issued so that people can come here again in a humane and safe way and return to their homes, which is where they want to be. And in tandem with the visa program, we need to have enforcement on the employer side. We need to make e-verify mandatory and enforceable, and have tough enforcement with employers. And if there's no demand on this side of the border for illegal employment, people won't come. If there's a legal path for them to get here, um, based on the needs of our economy, and we provide that path, people will use that path to come here, and we can end this divisive topic of illegal immigration in a very effective and very simple way.
As far as my expectations for the film, what I would like the viewer to walk away with, and as the credits roll, I want people to look at illegal as a story, not just of Laz Ayala, but of millions of others. I know Laz very well now, and I know there are many other people just like him. And so after watching Illegal, I want people to understand that this is a common story. It's not a unique story. I speak about Laz in El Salvador leaving his country. You see other people, you might know people in your own community that have fled their homes looking for a new life. So, first of all, getting in the shoes of your friends, your family, your community, and understanding that this story is normal, but not just the story of leaving, the story of success, where Laz, he climbed the ladder, he worked hard and achieved greatness. But also, the least known part of that story is lowering the ladder. And I want people to understand that Laz, as an immigrant, he is giving back to his community here in Southern Oregon. And he's not the only one. Many other people, immigrants here in the United States, love the United States and love to give back a form of appreciation. And that is what we don't see on the local, state, national news. You don't hear about those good stories. We only hear the stories about border crossings and the caravans, and that's all important, of course. But what's really important is knowing that Laz is one of many, and my hope is that many other immigrants will come forward and share their stories. Maybe they make movies about their own lives. That is what I would like to see.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for making this important film. And in addition to being available online all weekend via Eventive, people can catch Illegal in person at the Ross Ragland Theater here in Klamath Falls on Saturday, September 19th, around 6 p.m. for the 8th Annual Klamath Independent Film Festival. Thank you, both of you, and we look forward to seeing you here in Klamath Falls.
Thank you, Kurt.